welcome to Amazing Mind, the HMI Web TV talk show that introduces you to all sorts of interesting people and topics related to subconscious behavior. My name is Lisa Mackenberg, hypnotherapist, HMI instructor, and host. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Dr. Carole Lieberman. Now, Dr. Carole is a media psychiatrist. She's on the faculty of UCLA. If she looks familiar, you've probably seen her on Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Phil, and CNN. Today, she's going to talk to us about her book, Bad Girls, Why Men Love Them, and How Good Girls Can Learn Their Secrets. Please help me welcome my guest. Dr. Carole, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
You know what? I'd like to start with defining our terms. What are bad girls?
Yes, it's important to understand what I mean by bad girls because, you know, we have all these media bad girl television shows and so on. What I mean by bad girls is a woman who has been having a dysfunctional relationship with her father when she was growing up. That's how it starts, because the father, for a little girl, is the first love object. And so depending upon what kind of relationship, for example, obviously the worst is a father who's abusive, physically or sexually abusive. It could be just a father who's a workaholic who's trying to make a lot of money for his little girl, but he's not there. And of course, most common these days is the divorced family, where the father just isn't around and may have another girlfriend or may eventually have other children. And the outcome for all of these examples, all of these different kinds of scenarios, is a little girl who feels that she must be unlovable. Otherwise, her daddy would be showing more that he loves her.
What are some of the attributes of a bad girl?
Well, what happens is that these girls, then when they grow up and to be old enough to date, they are attracted to bad boys, which was my first book, Bad Boys, Why We Love Them, How to Live With Them, and When to Leave Them. And what happens then is that after the little girl grows up, she's dating a bad boy, and she gets hurt again. And so it gets proven to her again that she must not be lovable. So at some point, a lot of these women, or the women who ultimately become bad girls, take their hearts off their sleeve and harden it so that then they decide, okay, I'm not going to meet my prince, I'm not going to be loved, I might as well go for men to get something from them. Mm-hmm. And so then that's how we have what I call the dozen dangerous damsels, the 12 different types of bad girls, and each one comes from a different kind of family psychodynamic.
So this is being a bad girl is kind of an unhealthy dynamic.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, bad girls want to be loved. It's not that they become bad, you know, they'd rather not be bad. They'd rather be good and loved and, you know, find their prince. But when they get discouraged about this time and time again, at some point they just give up and they figure, okay, I'm going to take something that's next best to love. So we can see that, for example, the gold digger. It isn't really that a gold digger wants a man with money to pamper her better than a man who loves her and she can feel that she's in a loving relationship, but she uses the pampering, the gold card and all of that to be a substitute for the love.
So it feels like love, but I better settle for second best. If I can't have your time, I'll take your money.
Right, right. If I can't have, you know, if I can't feel that I'm really loved and I love you too, because these women aren't really in love with these guys. Mm-hmm. They're just using them for things. So, okay, the gold digger is sort of the most obvious type. Then there's the addict, who's essentially using a man as an enabler. The sex siren, who uses a man to admire her, to make her feel admired sexually. She uses sex as a weapon. The sexual withholder, a woman who uses the promise of sex as a weapon. The married woman on the prowl, that's a woman who has buyer's remorse, and at some point she wants another man, and not necessarily to marry him, but at least to have him on the side. So she's using this man to have this relationship on the side. The commitment phobe, stringing a guy along. The husband hunter and trapper, a woman who's, you know, will do anything to get a guy. For example, you know, I have stories in the book for each of these 12 types that I got from the 100+ men who I interviewed who were with bad girls. And some of these stories are unbelievable, but they are true because I could hear over the phone. I did 3 and 4 hour interviews,
Yes.
and I could hear their emotion over the phone. So, for example, the husband, hunter, and trapper, there were women who would pretend they had cancer and get a guy to marry her because she had a little girl, and she told him that she wanted him to marry her so that when she dies of cancer, the little girl will have a daddy. All kinds of things like that. The husband stealer, that's a woman who, that's like Rielle Hunter, where she's in the news these days. She's a good example of the husband stealer, as was Angelina Jolie. The ultimate damsel in distress, all of these women, these bad girls, to some degree, are damsels in distress. They make men feel as though they need to be rescued. The man can ride in on his white horse. And when a man does that to a woman and give her, you know, whether it's a gold digger wanting money or any of these things that the women want, the men feel that if they know unconsciously that if they give the woman what she wants, that there will be less of a chance that she will abandon him. Of course, that's not what happens. All of the bad girls break the men's hearts and do ultimately abandon them.
But I have a question. If these women were damaged in love, Dr. Carole, can't they be healed in love? If they find some of these men, although they started out using this as a defense mechanism, they started out being manipulators, can they be healed in love?
Well, you know, as a psychiatrist, you never like to say somebody can't be healed. But the problem is, I mean, yes, if they went to therapy or hypnotherapy.
Good answer.
You know, it's all about feeling that they are lovable. I mean, yes, if they are with a man who proves to them time and time again, even though they're showing this bad behavior, that they really will stick with them and still love them, sometimes it can help to heal them. But at the same time, a lot of times really they need therapy to heal the hurt, not from this man, it's the hurt that started out in childhood. So that's the therapy that they need.
So with these 12 archetypes, and I'm sure everything is a variation, and what eventually happens to these relationships?
Well, what ultimately happens, you'll see that I don't have a cheater type in here. I was saying the ultimate damsel in distress, the cougar, the ballbuster, and the bad girl scorned. There's no category for cheater. And that's because most of these women, all of these women, potentially can and often do cheat. Because if they're looking for something from the man and they're not getting it enough from the man that they picked, or they see another man who they think can give it to them better or more, they will cheat because, again, they haven't committed their heart. They're just, you know, in this to sort of soothe themselves.
Well, we talk so much about what was the cause for the women choosing this kind of dysfunctional behavior. But the thing I found most interesting about your book is it was a lot of stories from a lot of men. What makes a man susceptible to a bad girl, to being manipulated, and to being susceptible to this very strong defense mechanism?
Well, of course, the man, I mean, for all of these, I talk about for each of these types of bad girls, what makes them, you know, what makes them tick, and then what makes men attracted to a particular type. But in a general sense, what makes men attracted to these bad girls is that the bad girls make them feel like they are the biggest studs on the planet. And what was interesting is that the men who I interviewed, it wasn't that they were, you know, chopped liver. A lot of them were very successful. They had good jobs. Some of them were wealthy. They had good personalities. All of them had good personalities. I saw a lot of pictures, photographs. A lot of them were very handsome. It's not really the reality. It's what these men feel about themselves. Just like with women, you know, it's not on paper somebody can be really cool, but if they don't feel that way about themselves, then they're vulnerable. So these men, even though they had many attributes, they had a vulnerability. There was something that some reason why they needed a bad girl to prove to them by being with them that they were the biggest studs on the planet.
Now, you call these men sitting ducks,
yes,
which I love. Can you tell me some of the characteristics? You talked about the vulnerability. What are the other characteristics of sitting ducks where you're susceptible to being manipulated and hurt?
Well, yes, I know that that's what I call them, sitting ducks, because just like with the women, it comes, of course, from a dysfunctional childhood. With the men, the main reason why they are sitting ducks is because of their dysfunctional childhood. They had, obviously, with a man, it's their relationship with their mother that is the biggest, has the biggest impact on their love choice or their relationships that they get into.
Yes.
And so if it's a mother who's overly inclusive, like they become a mama's boy, or if it's a mother who's not there, who's either physically not there or psychologically not available, too distant or too close, that's a big factor in making the man vulnerable to a bad girl. Similarly, and this was kind of a surprise to me,
Yes.
but most of the men had fathers who were either physically not there or who were there but who left all the child raising to the mother so that they didn't really come to their games or they just really weren't very involved. And of course it makes sense because they didn't give these men, their sons, a feeling of manhood, of manliness, of an identity as a man. And so the men turned to these women to look for that.
Well, I have a very big question, which we are going to really get into the meat of in our second segment today, Dr. Carole, and that is with all this dysfunction flying around, and everybody here can see that these are subconscious behaviors, not being aware and having the need for love supersede logic, reason, willpower, of voice, decision-making, and superior judgment. But I want to get into the second part of your book. With all this dysfunction flying around, what can good girls like me do from a healthy and conscious place to learn some of the bad girl's secrets for being able to captivate and attract and interest good men so we can pursue some of their secrets, but in a healthy way. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to learn some of the secrets of bad girls and how in a conscious and healthy way we can learn how to attract healthy men, and healthy men out there in the studio audience and watching at home. We can learn how you can not be a sitting duck, but be present for a healthy relationship. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome to Amazing Mind, the HMI Web TV talk show that introduces you to all sorts of interesting people and topics. Girls.
Yes, it's important to understand what I mean by bad girls because, we have all these media, bad girl television shows and so on. What I mean by bad girls is a woman who has been having a dysfunctional relationship with her father when she was growing up. That's how it starts, because the father, for a little girl, is the first love object. And so depending upon what
related to subconscious behavior. My name is Lisa Mackenberg, hypnotherapist, HMI instructor, and host. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Dr. Carole Lieberman. Now, Dr. Carole is a media psychiatrist. She's on the faculty of UCLA. If she looks familiar, you've probably seen her on Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Phil, and CNN.
Kind of relationship, for example, obviously the worst is a father who's abusive, physically or sexually abusive. It could be just a father who's a workaholic who's trying to make a lot of money for his little girl, but he's not there. And of course, most common these days is the divorced family, where the father just isn't around and may have another girlfriend or may eventually have other children. And the outcome for all of these examples, all of these different...
Today, she's going to talk to us about her book, Bad Girls, Why Men Love Them, and how good girls can learn their secrets. Please help me welcome my guest. Dr. Carole, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
You know what? I'd like to start with defining our terms. What are bad